You're listening to Seattle Real Estate Podcast.
So we've got these massive lawsuits going. Kid who got killed, his mom is suing in CHOP, Anderson. His mom is suing the city of Seattle. We've got a coalition of businesses suing the city of Seattle. Both groups are saying, hey, you abandoned this area. We didn't have any police support. You basically just abandoned it. That's a no-go in our books. Going to sue you. So we've got these lawsuits going on, and a lot of it has to do with who ordered the abandonment of the Seattle Police Department's East Precinct. That's the precinct that's right there in CHOP that up until just a few weeks ago had the concrete barrier wall and then the fence, the cyclone fence up above the concrete wall, just, a real prison look. But I was okay with that because at least the building's safe. You got these knuckleheads running around, and we know who they are. They're just doing ridiculous stuff. In the winter, they piled up a bunch of snow on one of the exits and entrances to the East Precinct. Just ridiculous stuff. Trying to set it on fire. I did see the 20-year-old kid who tried to set the police precinct on fire last August. He got 20 months in jail. Good. I say good. Give him 40. Give him some extra credit time to just think about what he's done. But at least he got 20 months. At least we're doing something. Oh, hey, try and burn up the police precinct? Oh, we're not going to give you 2 years, but, more than a year and a half. I don't know. Is arson with intent to kill, is that like a 20-month sentence now? Apparently it is. So what are we talking about today? We are talking about this storyline, and it is retired Chief Carmen Best says she warned against abandoning the Seattle Police's East Precinct. Let's check it out. But before we do, love to have you subscribe, hit the like button for this video if you're watching on YouTube, all that good stuff that you know how to do. All right. If you're new, my name is Sean Reynolds. I own a couple of real estate companies. I read the news, oftentimes from Seattle, sometimes from all kinds of other places, but it's news that reasonable people want to hear, right? Okay. That's what we're doing. All right. So former Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best was interviewed in a law enforcement podcast recently. She declined to say exactly who made the crucial calls on the abandonment of the Seattle's East Precinct, but she said a bunch of interesting stuff, and that's what we're talking about. Seattle Times article. All right. Retired Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best says she warned before the CHOP formed last summer that ceding the Capitol Hill protest zone would be a threat to public safety. And she says she has no idea how her texts from that crucial time period were lost. Okay, I understand we're saying that. However, and I've talked to a bunch of you former police officers and current police officers and some statisticians. We've had some email back and forth. What are the odds of all of these officials? We've got Carmen Best, we've got the mayor, we've got Harold Scoggins, the fire chief, we've got a bunch of higher ups in the Seattle Police Department. What are the odds that they all lost their text messages just miraculously from this period? I don't know what happened to them. I thought they were on the server. And this is not like a small business owner losing some text or some email. This is critical stuff that you have to keep in your pipeline because it's mandated by law. So it's not Jimmy business owner trying to figure out his inventory for the next month. It is critical stuff that you've got to keep. And yet somehow all of these text messages from that crucial time period, they're lost. They're gone. And they are gone because I think they point to who made the call of abandoning the East Precinct. And there's some liability there. With these lawsuits going on, it's not good. There's City of Seattle is going to pay out huge on this. That's my prediction. In a new podcast episode released Monday and in a subsequent interview with the Seattle Times, Best publicly provided some of her most detailed recollections to date of the day last June when the Seattle Police Department abandoned the East Precinct after 10 days of street protests that erupted in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder by a Minneapolis police officer. And if you're new to this podcast, I started going over I'll have to see the first day that I went over to CHOP and it was Chaz at that point in time, Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. But then the protesters realized we don't have an autonomous zone here. No, we don't want that attached to us. We're going to go with Capitol Hill Occupy protests, however you want to call it. I was there like a week after, maybe 10 days after it started, and it was like a big block party that turned into not so much of a block party. And you can see the progression in my videos, and I'm thinking about releasing some of that stuff, just my raw footage, and because I guess it's interesting. I was there, so it's not as interesting to me because I'm like, oh yeah, I smelled really bad after coming back from that day. Just some of that. It was interesting. It was entertaining. But then it went sideways, and I didn't go over much after that because I didn't really want to die. Dying, not on the list of things to do that summer. While Bess still declined to say exactly who made the crucial calls on the ground, she reiterated it wasn't her decision to abandon the precinct. All right. I was actually kind of surprised that she made some comments about this on a podcast, because with those lawsuits going on, you know what the attorneys say? Keep your mouth shut. Keep your mouth shut. Let it come out in court. Keep your mouth shut. If you don't have anything to say that, is relevant here that you should be saying, don't say anything. Just don't say anything, especially not without an attorney. I think that's interesting, but she's no longer with the Seattle Police Department. So that's the thing, right? So instead, she described what happened as an almost unintentional series of events. Facing threats and the removal of the barricades that had separated protesters from the precinct, officers left and took weapons and sensitive material with them. But when they tried to come back later on the assumption the protesters would largely be gone, they were blocked from returning. Okay. So I don't know if I have read this before. So that is really interesting information. I think this was in the news at the time, but I wasn't paying attention to the nuances. And now I obviously do, because it's like, okay, what really happened there? What are the things that actually happened to have a police department of a major city abandon a precinct in the middle of an Occupy protest? How does that go down? Well, it goes down like that. Hey, we're taking our stuff out. We're going to be coming back. Hey, we're back. We're taking our precinct back. Oh, no, we're not. So negotiations happened. And as a peace offering, hey, let's give them the police precinct as a peace offering. And then we'll just have the summer of love. Just the summer of love. It'll be glorious. That is just such an easy target, right? Seattle's mayor, Jenny Durkin, said that. Just such an easy target, because we all know how that went. Not well. It is what it is. And we can kind of look back and go, it wasn't the summer of love. Okay. Former Chief Best, sat down with Jerry Ratcliffe, a former Metropolitan Police officer in London and a criminal justice professor at Temple University in Philadelphia, in early May to record the episode of his podcast, Reducing Crime. The two lunched at the Blue Water Bistro in Seattle's Leside neighborhood, and their nearly 45-minute discussion, replete with the sounds of clinking silverware and the murmured conversations of other diners, covered a range of topics from police shootings and Best's experience as the city's first Black female police chief to racism in America and the need for national standards in policing. You can see a full transcript of this at reducingcrime.com/podcast. Their discussion, first reported Monday by Seattle's KUOW, also detailed what led to the decision to take down Seattle police barricades at 11th Avenue and Pine Street. So 11th Avenue, I believe that is, 10th, and 11 is right in the heart of CHOP. I think 10th is one block, obviously, to the west, because that's how numbers go sequentially. And because this is an east address, they get bigger going east. That's a real estate thing. Don't mind me, just talking out loud here. So they took down police barricades at 11th Avenue and Pine Street, which had become a flashpoint when some protesters hurled rocks, bottles, and fireworks at officers who used tear gas and flashbang devices against the crowd. The barricades removal came about after the FBI notified city officials, including Best, that the agency had received credible threats that the precinct was going to be burned down, Best said. burned down. Not good. Not good. And we have seen that. We do have precedent for that in the United States. And because the city had really decided, to be honest with you, that we were going to open up those streets, it wasn't our first choice to do so. It was a command. We did not want to open up the streets. But the mayor's office and others were like, look, there's a skirmish line there, and that's a point of contention if you leave people there, Best told Radcliffe. Okay. How about the 2 kids who got murdered in CHOP? Was that also a skirmish line as well? A little bit to the east, and then one a little bit to the south and west. I mean, the whole thing is just like, what? What are we doing? I think a lot of people just ignored it. Okay, we're just going to ignore that until it goes away because this is kind of crazy. I mean, it's just nutty that whole thing even happened. And now the lawsuits, they're going. Lifting the police barricades was against our better judgment. And as a result, Seattle Police Department decided to move weapons and sensitive materials out of the precinct, Best said during the podcast. They evacuated it. They were given orders. Hey, you can't really go back in there. Get your stuff out. And from what I understand, they evacuated the stuff and the protesters didn't go in and destroy the inside of the police department, but they also did some stuff that probably wasn't very cool and didn't make it smell very good. Preparations for vacating the precinct started June 8th, 2020, hours after Best said she ordered SWAT officers to deploy tear gas to disperse the demonstrators when officers spotted a man with a gun in the crowd and felt like it was a life safety situation, and I concurred, the Seattle Times previously reported. So they're trying to diffuse the situation, and this is how they handled it. And then we had the summer of love until it wasn't. Kids got killed. And by kids, I mean a 16-year-old and a 19-year-old. And now we've got lawsuits and people are trying to place blame. And then all of a sudden we've got, I don't know what happened to my text messages. Where'd they go? What happened to them? It's just for that time period around CHOP. I mean, we didn't lose really anything. Really? The odds of that happening are slim to none. Get that many people lose their text messages. I'm just saying, right? Even then, Best told Radcliffe, she told their commanders that they weren't evacuating the precinct and would return the next day, which was June 9th. But when a police captain and an acting lieutenant tried to get into the precinct, they ran up against protesters' barricades and were approached by the armed protesters who told them, "Get off our sovereign property," Best said. Okay. Whew. Not good. So they were claiming it as theirs, as they often do. I just did I recorded a podcast this morning. We talk about these people who are like, yeah, we lay claim to everything in the Western Hemisphere based upon this lineage of our sovereignty. It's just nuts. I mean, it really is. It's just nuts. But that's what they were doing. And in order to try and avoid a massive confrontation like they would have later, this happened. A couple hours later, it was like they evacuated the precinct. I'm like, what happened? Best told Radcliffe. So it just wasn't clear exactly what transpired. But I think the idea was that the next day, the demonstration would happen. These things usually lasted till 2 or 3 later in the morning. And then once the crowd dissipated, we would start moving equipment and people back into the precinct. But it didn't. That's not what happened, right? All right. So, I mean, that does make more sense that they were going back in and they didn't just, abandon it for, okay, we're going to abandon it for as long as this CHOP thing happens. Then once it happened, it's like you couldn't put the genie back in the bottle. You're like, okay, now we're farming in the park and now so literally, I remember, I remember rolling up and I'm like, these are big concrete barricades in the middle of the streets. So Seattle Department of Transportation, they bring in their massive trucks. They're loaded up with these concrete barricades. And then they've got these, cranes that lift them off. And they've got these, it's like building, it's like when they put down barricades along the side of a freeway when they're doing freeway work. It's a massive operation. And that's what they did in order to kind of provide an outline of CHOP. They put these barricades up at these intersections, and it was, the protesters had these signs at these barricades, and you're just walking around going, what is going on? And there's zero police, obviously, because, police are not popular there, and they abandoned the precinct. And the precinct is on the eastern side of CHOP. It's on the kind of the southeastern portion. And it was right there. It was right in the heart of just all this craziness going on. In a Monday phone interview, Best said Assistant Chief Deanna Nolette, current interim chief Adrian Diaz, and a few others did in fact return to the East Precinct for a short stint, basically to get stuff out, from my understanding. And then overnight, one of the commanders had made the decision to, that for whatever reason, to exit the precinct at that time, too, and did. That sentence right there tells me, okay, stuff was going on behind the scenes there, and stuff happened. She's not going to say directly, but it is going to come out. We're going to find out one way or the other. And so we were really back to how we were going to negotiate, how we were going to get back into the precinct, said Best, who is currently in Memphis, Tennessee, discussing police leadership with members of the Shelby County Sheriff's Office on Monday. That's interesting. That decision by one of her subordinates kicked off the 3.5-week occupation of a 6-block protest known as Chaz and later the CHOP. You'll hear major commentators still talking about Chaz. I think it was, who was it? And I don't watch a lot of major media because I think so much of it it just upsets me because it's just this narrative driven news. And they get half the facts right. Sometimes it's not even half the facts. A lot of it's just opinion, kind of like a real estate guy reading the news, But I feel like I just kind of read the news and give my opinion. Other people are just saying, this is the way it happened. And my narratives come about from what I pick, right? All right, these are the topics that you guys want to hear, that reasonable people want to hear. We've got some pro-business in there. We got some Seattle. We got some CHOP, because who doesn't want to talk about CHOP? Because it was such a train wreck, and we were watching it like there for a month. This isn't going to go well. Nope. It's not. Oh, this is how we're going to end? Oof, yeah. Hope no more people get killed. Best told Radcliffe the occupied zone was unlike anything any police agency in the country had seen before, and catapulted Seattle into the national media spotlight. I remember I did a live stream there, and this was before the protesters basically banned live streamers, because live streamers have an instant recording of what's going on. I'm taking a cell phone, I'm on a gimbal, and I'm recording what's going on, and it's live to YouTube. That's the platform I was streaming it to. And I remember looking down at one point in time at my phone, and I'm 52. My eyes aren't great. I'm looking at this cell phone, and I couldn't quite see the number of people that were on this live stream. And then I was like, it was either like 22,000 or 24,000 people on a live stream across the world. Because at one point in time I asked, hey, where are you guys from? This is like my second or third live stream ever, and I don't really know what I'm doing. And people are just, calling out from all over the world. And I remember thinking, what is going on? This is a hot topic. This is craziness. And then I shot a bunch of videos, and one of those videos, I think CHOP at Night, has 1.4 maybe 1.5 million views. 1.5 million people have looked at that video about CHOP. I mean, it's just some weird stuff. And it was just something happening in Seattle. And that's when I kind of realized, this is a big deal. I had one black lady come up next to me, and I think it was maybe my third or fourth live stream. And she was nicely dressed, and she was also maybe doing a live stream or maybe just shooting some video with her phone. She got pretty close to me, and I went, CHOP, you don't get close to anybody because you don't know who anybody is. We're all masked up, and you don't really trust anybody that's there unless you've got people there. And oftentimes I did not. And so this black lady, probably my age, maybe a little bit younger, nicely dressed, she came up to me and she kind of looked over my shoulder at my phone. And I'm just kind of, doing this number where I'm not turning my head and I'm looking at her. And she leans over and she says to me, "You are popular." Because I had, I don't know how many thousand people. And I'm like, "Oh, thanks." And that was the interaction. It was fine. It was, no problem. But it was like, this is a big, big topic. And yeah, it did catapult us into the national spotlight, not in a good way. Hey, what do you got going on there, Sean? We got CHOP, apparently. And there was no political will to do anything about it, she said. No, because it was billed as the summer of love. It was, until it wasn't. And that was with Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan telling CNN the protest could turn into a summer of love. I love that. I'm so happy she said that because, it just gives the storyline that much more bite. And I understand where she's coming from. She was looking at it from, okay, we're just going to have these block parties go on and, peaceful protesting. And it didn't end up that way. The whole time, the officers and the people who were responding to that area knew it was a problem, Best told Radcliffe. And we'd been saying, look, our response times are up. We've had rapes. We had robberies. We had assaults. And I remember giving a news conference at some time along the way and holding up the reports because every time I said something, people would say we were just making it up. I remember one newscast that she was doing live and this jerk off came up with a megaphone and he was interrupting her. And I remember her turning around and just looking at the guy and just saying, "That is so rude." And I remember thinking, that's just annoying. That's the chief of police right there trying to talk. Let her talk. Just let her talk. But no, that's not how CHOP went down. You got just some knucklehead, just blasting out whatever comments come to his mind, which I'm sure were, who knows what the guy was saying. It was just nonsense. Best reiterated what she said in the podcast in a Monday phone interview, saying that she tried to warn the city about what she saw as a clear threat to public safety. Shocking, a clear threat to public safety, right? If you look back, they were bringing out porta potties. Yeah, they had porta potties. You can see in some of my video, they had porta potties, probably a dozen of them lined up, and they would do this crazy graffiti. I remember walking along, kind of doing a side slide shot on these porta potties. And you've never seen art like that. If you're going to call it art, if you consider graffiti art, I really don't, but I get it. You know what I mean? There's some really cool images that people do in graffiti, but for the most part, tagging up public buildings or private buildings that don't have the permission to be tagged, I'm pretty much a no-go on that. But yeah, they brought in all these porta potties and these barricades. And if you look back, they were bringing out porta potties. The fire department was handing out hand sanitizer and cookies. They tore up the park to build a vegetable garden, and the Parks Department seemed to be okay with it. Well, could you imagine the Parks Department going, hey, put that sod back down? I literally remember the protesters being out there with hose, the equipment, the yard equipment, those kind of hose. I don't know where you're going with that thought, but back to the farm equipment. And they're, taking out pieces of the park lawn. I'm like, I don't know, guys. You're going to plant crops. How long are we planning on being here? And how much are you realistically expecting to feed with this small, 5 or 6 round area, garden area? It was entertaining, right? And those areas are still there to my knowledge. There was not a lot of will or support to do anything about it, and I think it wasn't until it was clear, even though I was trying to sound the alarm in my view, well before that this can really be problematic. But clearly, the murder of 2 young African-American men really brought that home. That and the march on Mayor Durkan's home by one of our finest Seattle council members, Shama Swant. It was literally like a day or two after that. And it was obviously in the works for a while that Mayor Durkan is like, all right, we're closing CHOP down. This is the liability. Here's how this is going to go. She was referring to the June 20, 2020 fatal shooting of 19-year-old Lorenzo Anderson, followed 9 days later by the shooting death of 16-year-old Antonio Mays Jr. And what's interesting is in between those, another 2 people were shot. So you've literally got just shootings happening within CHOP. You had attempted rape or a rape of a deaf woman, I believe, a whole bunch of assaults. You've got the homeless people living in the back end of the park, the north end of the park. You got guys running around with guns. I mean, legit, you've got guys running around with guns and no police around. I mean, how did people not see that going wildly sideways? At the beginning, I was kind of like, hey, all this craziness that you're talking about, I'm not seeing it. And that's why I went back, I think like a weekend later, and I did CHOP at night with a couple of friends. One who's very tall, 6'8". Dan, thanks for being there. Because it was a little scary. It was a little unnerving, but that evening went okay too, until it didn't. The Saturday I was there, the Sunday after that, I believe, is when Antonio Mays Jr. was shot down, and he was literally riddled with bullets. So police cleared out the CHOP early on June 1st, 2020, arresting 44 people in the process. And by then, all of the groups had kind of cut their deals, in my opinion. And the protesters, they all piled up on the eastern side of the East Precinct, and they barricaded themselves in there. And that's where they kind of had their last stand, and they just got overrun by a massive amount of Seattle Police Department. Massive. And it was just like, ooh, yeah. It's like a SWAT team entering. But, I did live stream of that, and that was pretty wild. The helicopters over the top. Crazy times. Bess told Ratcliffe she was terrified clearing out CHOP could turn into a mini Waco, Texas. I kind of thought that too, but I'm a real estate guy, so I don't really understand the implications. So I'm just going to go out there with a GoPro and a camera, and we'll just see what happens. What could go wrong? And that was the Waco reference is referring to the 1993 law enforcement siege on the Branch Davidian compound in Texas. That was wild, right? That went sideways. Asked to comment on Best interviews, Camaria Hightower, a Durkin spokesperson, said in an emailed statement that the Office of Police Accountability has been conducting in-depth interviews and reviewing records with Seattle Police Department and city officials about last summer's events at the East Precinct. We will learn more from those as well as the discovery from the ongoing litigation on these matters, Hightower wrote. There's what is going on. Discovery is going to bring out what happened. I don't think you can keep a lid on this for much longer. It's going to come out. And I think the city has some pretty big liability, and I think some massive payouts are going to happen. But then again, I'm just a real estate guy. What do I know? But no, I think that's where this is going. And I think that's why it's so important. And that's why we keep talking about these lost text messages. Because what are the odds that, I don't know, is it 7 or 8 people now have miraculously had their text messages disappear from whatever server system they're supposed to be backed up on? I'm not sure what happened, but they're gone. Crazy times, right? Yep. So as this storyline continues, and it will because of the litigation on these matters, I will bring you updates right here on the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. Thanks so much for joining in. Again, I'm Sean Reynolds. I'm the owner of Summit Properties Northwest, Reynolds & Klein Appraisal. You don't really care about that. All you care about is that I read the news that you want to hear. Thanks for being here. Love to have you subscribe. That's it for me. I got to move on to like a actual real estate topic. I got to throw those in every now and then so people don't say, you're not even real estate. I got to have the appearance of real estate, right? I am a real estate guy. Okay, we'll talk soon. Be safe. Talk to you guys then. Bye. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you'll know when our next video is out.